Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to see every one of you, brothers and sisters, here this morning. And I do want to give a report now a little bit about some of our work for the Lord, but it's a report with a twist because I want to share a little bit about what we're learning along the way, going from a cookie cutter mentality to a Saltshaker ministry. And so with that in mind, let's open up the scriptures together. Romans chapter 12. Thank you so much for coming here this morning. Romans chapter 12. I'm going to try and make you into good Romans Christians this weekend. Slide, please. Every time I say that, I feel like I'm in a baseball game. The big difference between American baseball and Canadian baseball is we say slide, please, and every once in a while, please slide. But Romans chapter 12, verses 3 to 8. Of course, you know that this follows just after those oft read words in verses 1 to 2 in Romans 12. But let's carry down to verses 3 to 8 now. Paul says, "For by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned. For as in one body we have many members, and the members do not all have the same function, so we, though many, are one body in Christ, and individually members one of another. Having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us use them. If prophecy, in proportion to our faith. If service, in our serving. The one who teaches, in his teaching. The one who exhorts, in his exhortation. The one who contributes, in generosity. The one who leads with zeal. The one who does acts of mercy with cheerfulness." May the Lord bless his word to us. Well, let me start by introducing the team. Slide, please. Just make sure that the guys in the back are synced up here with me. Yes, you'll see my lovely wife, Helen. She used to be Helen Smith, the oldest daughter of Pete and Elaine Smith, who introduced Postal Bible Studies to North America. And when Helen was 16, she moved to Canada from England. And she went into, well, we have four lovely daughters, beautiful daughters, yes, Amy, Becca, Cassia, and Emma. And we serve as a team for the Lord. We're all here this weekend, thanks to your encouragement and hospitality to us. We know that it's not practical or possible for us to always travel together as a family, but it is such a blessing for us to be all here together this Easter weekend with you. We are a little disappointed, though, that the conveners of this conference failed to invite one member of our team. Slide, please. And that is my very persistent partner in prayer, Maisie. She's a little Pomapoo, and she is maybe not serving the Lord, but she's certainly in a kennel this weekend, thanks to your overlooking this important member of our team. She was very anxious to try those new puppy relief stations in the airports that they have these days, but another time perhaps. So let me just tell you a little bit about our story. I was born and raised in this little town called Austin, 500 people, very small little village, and I still live there to this day. Helen, meanwhile, came from the big cities of England, and we met when she was 16 or so. She went into nursing. I went into college for mechanical engineering, and we got married, and we started having some children. She was working in nursing. I was working in engineering-related job, a great job that the Lord gave me. When on January 6th, 2014, I think it was, the Lord spoke to me through my daily reading. I was in Acts chapter 6, where the apostles say, we will devote ourselves to prayer and to the ministry of the word. And as I read those words, everything inside me came alive. And it's like, that is what God put me on earth for. It's maybe not what he put you on earth for, but I had this sense that this is what the Lord put me on earth for. Everything within me, the way he's made me and wired me and gifted me, I just cry out. I want to be the person that can say, I devote myself to prayer and to the ministry of the word. And that began a journey that culminated 2 years later in me leaving my work at a place called Southport and us going out full time into what I like to call word work, because I was already doing the work of the Lord before I do what I do now. And I just want to say something to you very quickly, that there was many things that I struggled with and we struggled with in pursuing this call that I sensed from the Lord. But one of them was this. I had a great fear that if I left my job and did what I'm doing now, I had a great fear that I would be leaving the front lines. I want you to hear that I would be leaving the front lines. My heart goes out, evangelistically, my heart goes out to secular people who live within a world in which everything they believe they need for finding identity and meaning and purpose is found within this closed system world. They don't need to go outside to a supernatural being, to a God, to find these things. And it doesn't really cross their mind a whole lot to think of the Lord. And my heart goes out to those kinds of people, especially. I'm drawn to them. And I believe that we need to be many things in order to successfully reach secular people. But two of them are that we need to be deeply embedded and distinctly different. We need to be deeply embedded. In other words, we can't silo ourselves and pull away, but we need to be right in there with other secular people, spending a lot of time with them, developing a lot of relationships with them, because there's just so much in their mind and in their worldview that makes them hear the Christian gospel as utterly implausible. And the only way, or a very important way, that you and I, if we're to reach them, is to be deeply embedded in relationships with secular people, and at the same time, never losing our distinctive difference. What do I mean by that? I mean, not that we turn our nose at a whole bunch of things and they watch us and say, wow, what an amazing person, right? He doesn't do this and he doesn't do that. No, what I mean is that they sense that there's something in our hearts called grace. And it's just sitting there in our hearts. And that we're doing all of our play and work and living out of a place of rest, out of a place of, this person has found grace. And they're drawn to that. That you're close to them. You're close to them. And so some of you are maybe playing golf and playing hockey and you're working. And anyways, I had that with my previous work. I had relationships with hundreds of people from many places, secular people. And by God's grace, I believed I was preserved in being distinctly different. And I had this great fear that if I pulled away from that, I would be stepping away from the front lines. And so much of what I'm going to say in the next minutes of this report is sort of our battle to stay in the front lines, even though I'm severely disadvantaged now because I'm full-time doing word work. I'm at a severe disadvantage from some of you. I'm so far away, and we're trying to stay in there, stay in the game, despite being being a preacher. So let me just tell you about one other thing. That was my battle before we got commended. Now let me tell you about a battle since. It started about 4 or 5 months before COVID. And basically, you could have written over my life in all caps, GUILT, guilt. 96 font, bold, guilt. Why? Because I struggle with a lot of lies in my heart, and they never seem to go away. Things like this. Mike, you should compare yourself to other workers all the time. Mike, if you're enjoying what you're doing, it's clearly not God's will for you to do it. Right? I mean, that's what our God is like, right? He loves making us do things we hate. And you're not supposed to say amen to that. You guys are doing very well at not saying amen this morning. That's excellent. And things like, oh, so-and-so is extremely zealous in evangelism and bold and is at it all the time. And you should be doing it with at least as much zeal and with at least as much time devoted to those things. And so, and so you could say I was dealing with a cookie cutter mentality. an approach to ourselves that says every one of us should look the same, sound the same, do the same, dress the same, and be gifted the same, and be devoted to the same things. And if you're not, guilt. And so you hear Brian do his report, and you hear me do my report, and maybe there's one person that has this problem too. And you're sitting there thinking, oh, Mike does this, and Brian, right? And I hear someone is doing work on the streets with, homeless people and so on. Oh, guilt. Why am I not doing that? And then we take a cookie cutter approach to the world, to the unsaved, and we say, oh, one size fits all, work like we should just take the same approach. I memorized 3 points, and next in line, step in front of me, I'm going to now say to you my 3 points. Next, please, and take the same approach. And I mean, the Bible does talk about sort of a distribution of seed without the soil analysis. Just scatter it. That's a biblical approach, to just scatter seed indiscriminately. But then the Bible also says there's another approach too, and that is you talk to Nicodemus a little bit differently than you talk to the Samaritan woman. And maybe some of us are better suited to deal with an introverted, unsafe person than an extroverted, unsafe person. You see? And so I struggle with this. We can call it a cookie cutter approach, but slide. What we want to talk about is a Saltshaker approach. Because in our reading today, Paul tells us not to think of ourselves more highly than we ought to think. You see, underneath those lies that were going on in my heart was a thing called pride. That I have this weird belief that I should be able to do it all, right? That I have no limits, evidently. I should, and my Lord expects me to be as involved with homeless people as those who give themselves to that, as embedded with secular people as those whose calling is to work full time in that field, to be as generous as the most gracious donor in the church, to be as evangelistic and bold as the most outgoing. You see, this is nonsense. And Paul says, and this is such a breath of fresh air for me, he says, Mike, don't think of yourself more highly than you ought to think. Take a Saltshaker approach. You have been gifted individually. And so here's, could you put the 3 points out, brothers, back there? Put the 3 bullets out. So we take a Saltshaker approach to ourselves, and we say, we all have different strengths and weaknesses, and we actually find freedom in living within those constraints. We don't have to buck them all the time. And then we take a Saltshaker approach to the unreached, and we say it's not a one size fits all. That maybe one way of drawing alongside this person is going to be different from reaching this person over here. And then a Saltshaker approach to the church this is wonderfully liberating. Did you hear what we read? We're all members of the same body, which means what? Which means I don't need to be guilty and feel guilty when I find out at this conference that some brother is doing way more work with the homeless than I am. Instead, I can praise God and say, I'm part of the same body as he, right? And I actually, without lifting a finger, I actually share in his or her work. Now, I need to be plugged in where the Lord has put me, or else I'm not really a team player. But if I'm plugged in where I am, and I also don't need to pray for all of your needs, right? I can't pray for every single thing I hear about, but I try to pray for the things the Lord wants me to pray for. I try to serve and engage where I've been placed. And then I can go to sleep at night thinking, the Lord is head of his church. He's head of the body. He's staying up tonight. He's figuring it all out. I'm just a little human guy, and I get to live within my little limits and yet remind myself that I'm part of the whole thing. It's wonderfully, wonderfully liberating for me. So we're going from a cookie cutter mentality to a Saltshaker approach. So let's actually get into this then. Slide. My hidden agenda for you, which is suddenly not very hidden anymore, is that you would be encouraged to serve the Lord with your unique gifting. And secondly, to see yourself as on the front lines. If you're in school, if you're at work, I really believe this. You're the ones on the front lines. As far as reaching secular people goes, I'm at a severe disadvantage from you. I'm fighting it all the time. And thirdly, to know that you share in the whole ministry of the church. And so here's what never came to my mind in all this, okay? What never came to my mind was that brother who was so bold in evangelism, never came to my mind to go to him and say, hey, how come you're not studying the Greek of Romans 12? Huh? Right? How come you're not digging into big fat commentaries? How come you're not giving expositional preaching and all this stuff? Whereas that's what I just, man, I just love that kind of thing. That's how the Lord has gifted me. I love it. The biggest thing for me is to learn and to study. And then I get really fired up when I'm ministering to Christians, especially. I'm not a great evangelist, to be honest. But I really get fired up when I get to help believers and tell them the gospel. We'll touch on that in a wee little bit. So let's go into the report slide. So 3 things that we do. This is just trying to summarize a whole nest of things, but just going to try to simplify it into 3 things. We do event-based evangelism, we do everyday evangelism, and we do evangelical evangelism. I'll explain what that means in a bit, but we do event-based evangelism. So let's start there. So here's the thing I don't really enjoy doing. It's booth work. Now there's brothers who just love this stuff, right? Just love it. And COVID comes, oh, can't do booth work. Well, COVID comes and I'm like, yay. I don't need to go to Brandon Winter Fair and stand in front of that booth anymore. And I feel guilty about it. And you laugh. What a helpful bunch you are. But I feel guilty about it. So anyways, so they wanted me to help with this. And I said, I can't do the usual thing. I just can't. I'm not a pushy person. I'm not a salesperson. I'm not a, stand in front and do this quiz and the lights light up. And I just can't do that. And so I said, but if you want me to help, then I'll design a booth that I can stand in front of, like barely. And so, and ideas came from other sources. This isn't all us that came out with this. But anyways, there's a book called If You Could Ask God One Question. We took the cover, we blew it up into a big, poster, as you can see. You can't see it, but in fainter fonts, it was things like, if someone came along and looked at it, it'd be like, why is there suffering in the world? Why did you make me the way I am? Things like that, right? And so we made this big banner, as you can see, and then we had the little podium in the middle with a stack of these books that people could just help themselves to. On the side was a solarium table, solarium cards, just a whole bunch of photos. And we had one girl, my sister-in-law, Danielle, was especially good at this, really good at this. Just people come and they're curious and they're looking at these pictures, and then you just begin to ask them some really, questions that help people open up. And she was so good at it because that's how the Lord has made her. And it's a teamwork approach. And then we had something interactive on the side there. You can see we made a big question mark, and we had these red sticky papers, and people could come and say, what they would ask God if they could ask him one question. And if people wanted to just burn that thing off and stick it on, we just, fine, I'm not going to push. Just, right? But if they did hang around, we could go and, hey, what did you write? And, I asked, why did you make Donald Trump president? Great evangelism opportunity. No, but others were very serious. Others were very serious. And so let's do another. We've done a few of these booths. Slide, please. Yeah, capturing. This was another book that we did it around. We've done a few different ones. But it's just an approach that works for me, where we're just drawing people in, and occasionally, we're smiling and so on, but it's an approach that works for me. And quickly, just had some really good chats with agnostic and atheist people. I'm learning, by the way, to reset my goals for those conversations. My goal is no longer that he would leave the conversation knowing that he lost. My goal is that he would leave the conversation knowing that he was loved. Saying, that Christian is so weird, but he listened to me. And he entered into my objections. That's my goal. And it's led to some wonderful conversations. It turns out God made me somewhat introverted, and I love to read. And he's also made me good at listening and good at kindness and friendship. And turns out maybe I'm the right guy for the job after all. And so this one man came, and he came up to the podium, and he starts reading this book, and he starts at page 1, and then he read page 2, and then he read page 3, and he kept reading. He's just standing there reading. And I was in a conversation with someone else, and I turn around and I see this guy just standing there reading this book. And I thought, well, maybe someone else on the team has already approached him. I don't want to be pushy. And so I just let him go for a while. And he wasn't moving. He kept reading through the pages. And finally I came up to him and I said, so great to see you reading the book. Thank you so much. And he says, I'm an environmentalist. So I plan to read the book right here and stick it back so I'm not burning trees, you know? So, yeah, I love trees too. And turns out I read a book on the hidden life of trees. You know, I'm such a book nerd, but anyways, that was not planned to. We had a great conversation. And yeah, we just had a great conversation. Turns out the Lord had been preparing me. Turns out I'm the right kind of guy to talk to that environmentalist. And he lives in Winnipeg, and we've met many times. I drive in, we have a long chat, coffee. I've read a lot of Tim Keller's books. If you want to equip yourself to reach out to secular people, you will find, if you really internalize the meaning for God, Making Sense of God by Tim Keller, and then you could go on to The Reason for God by Tim Keller, you'll find yourself just loaded with just helpful things to say that regularly point people to Jesus Christ. He wanted to buy a Bible, not the cheapest one, $70. So he bought a Bible. And so I just pray that he will one day come to faith in Christ. I forgot to tell you the most important part. He came to me and he's reading this book. He says, I'm an environmentalist. He says, you know what? I had this great job and I still have it. I have a wife and children, but I got big time into alcohol addiction. I went to AA, did the 12 steps. I'm dry, I'm free, and I'm coming to your booth to find out who my higher power is. Who my higher power is. And so, yeah, anyways, that was a wonderful gift. So slide, where are we at here? Okay, another thing we've tried to do is rent the community hall in our little town and have a big roast beef dinner, invite people in for free. We've called it Cloudy with a Chance of Joy, because we do it in January when Manitoba is in weather lockdown and everyone's depressed. It's so dark and cold. And so we say, we'll call it Cloudy with a Chance of Joy. Maybe you'll come in and find some joy. And we're going to have a little talk on joy. And Carrie? Yeah, I'm not going to point her out, but I got the right name, right? Yeah, sorry. Our sister's embarrassed. But she, with IBH, helped us design this beautiful, a little newsletter thing to go out. And yeah, a lot of people came. I don't know how many people. It was over 100. It's less than 200. And we've done that a few years. We had a little thing where they could fill out and say, I want to attend a Life Explored Bible study. And I'm all about reaching out to secular people. And so I'm thinking, and I'm getting some responses from different people. I'm like, yeah, Elle's going to come, and this other lady's going to come, and this agnostic guy's going to come. It sounded really encouraging. So we had our first Life Explored, and none of them came. Do you know who came? A bunch of like 80-year-old ladies came to Life Explored, this trendy outreach for young, hip people. And a bunch of 80-year-olds came. And I was devastated. Like, this is totally not reportable, I was devastated. But we just did it. And there's a 80-something-year-old lady who's going to heaven now because of that. Slide. Yeah, I won't talk. How are we doing for time? We got half an hour. Half an hour. So this is another thing. This is down in Clyde, Ohio, and Kevin Miller and his family are great people down there. And anyways, we did a little outreach event where we would invite their friends from school to come, and we play some games, and I would just do a little talk. And this is another thing that I feel the Lord has equipped me at. I can do this sort of thing. It was really good, but I'm not going to spend too much time. Slide. Here's something that might interest some of you. Jonathan Bell and his family in Portage wanted to do a soccer camp in Portage. And they have these big soccer fields right by the hall and this beautiful new River Road Gospel Hall. And so soccer camp, we've done it many times. It's my favorite week of the year. I love soccer. I love speaking to kids. It's like, this is how the Lord's made me. He's gifted me for this, right? And so we go out, they come in and we talk to them about how the day's going to go, and we go out, do our warm-ups, we do a bunch of drills, and then they come back in, and it's hot, it's in summer, and they come into the air-conditioned buildings and they have their snack, and then they come into the auditorium and slide, and they sit there, they're just wiped, but it's cool, and they're fed, and they just drink it in, like they just listen so well, and they love it. And then they go back out once we've shared with them about Jesus. They go back out and they play a soccer game, and it's so much fun. And many kids have come. I don't know if this would be possible. Maybe you've tried something like this, but very fruitful event-based evangelism. Slide. Helped out with a lot of VBSs. This one is in Winnipeg, but I've done quite a few VBSs where I do the Bible part for the kids, and just enjoy that as well. But I think you're very familiar with these sorts of things, so I'll keep going. Slide. We have a weekly Kids for Christ through the fall in Austin. And this past year, because of COVID, we did it outdoors in this beautiful park. You can see my father-in-law, Pete Smith, was helping with that week. And we get a nice bunch of kids out. Again, these are things that you're very familiar with, so I won't dwell on it, but love doing Kids for Christ, doing this youth work. Slide. Other event-based evangelism thing that we help with is Biblelicious Camp. This is Becky Kew up in Sandy Bay First Nations. And for 2 weeks of the summer, we do these camps, and Helen and I go up. Helen's the camp cook and nurse, and I'm one of the Bible teachers there. And Becky's going to be talking about this afternoon, I believe, maybe in her Q&A that's recorded, I don't know. But this is a joy to help with as well. Becky's doing a tremendous work. Maybe I could just pause and say that Becky is, like, when I think of who do I know that's like the Lord Jesus, there's 3 names that come up immediately. One of them is sitting here. Becky's the other, and another one's an elder in Portage. And she does the work. She works harder than anyone I know. She does the work of 10 commended workers. And she's a dear friend. So this is in the bottom picture. This is what we call the man cave. So I and I think Andre Wigston there and whoever is helping us, we take the guys into the man cave, and we do the little Bible time with them and tell them about the gospel. I don't think I'll dwell on this, other than this, that we really need some guys to help this year. So if you're sitting here thinking, how does the Lord made me? Like, how has he gifted me? Is this something that I could help with? And maybe the answer is yes, then please talk to me, because we could really use your help this summer. Stephen and Heidi have come. They were a great help when they came. And so I really encourage you to do that. Slide. Here's something we did last summer at 5th Avenue Gospel Hall in Portage. We rented an outdoor stage and put it on the parking lot. And we called it Let's Get Real. Let's Get Real. So the format was that each night we would begin by just getting a local person from the church on the stage and interviewing them, having a conversation. It was, one night, let's get real, real justice, real love, real freedom, real acceptance, so things like that. And then the conversation would kind of go on those lines, like how have you found hope and so on. So we had a conversation like that, and then I would come up and speak afterwards in the gospel. And it was going over the internet too, and FM broadcaster and so on. And so this was a really encouraging event for the believers. It was less encouraging in terms of how many people came out. And I finish with this. This is my event-based evangelism portion, right? I finish with this to underscore the need for another kind of evangelism. We cannot rely too heavily on event-based evangelism. We can have these great events, great ideas. Let's get real. The kind of thing where anyone could just pull up a lawn chair and sit 300 feet away and still hear and still, hear the gospel. But really, very, very few would do so. Why? I think because we're lacking that deeply embedded part, some of us. Deeply embedded and distinctly different. We can get so busy doing events that we lack friendships and relationships with unsaved people. And this is, I'm not faulting anyone. It's not the end all and be all to have lots of people to bring to events, right? The Lord can work in many ways, but I'm just saying, I think where I'm coming from, that maybe we're become too reliant on event-based evangelism. Anyway, slide. So let's talk about everyday evangelism for a little bit. And here I just want to like open, and I know probably lots of you are thinking this way already, but I just want to open the window on what a missional mindset looks like in my life, an everyday evangelism type mindset. So have this old family van, it's got some rust on the bottom. It got rust. And I'm always going through life in town, just thinking like who would the Lord lead, like who's out there, who can we reach? And I find out about this guy who's divorced, used to be a mechanic, likes to tinker away. And I think, oh, well, maybe he could fix the rust. And so I go up to his house and, would you? Yeah. I'll do it and I'll pay you and all that stuff. And so it takes quite a long time for him to work away at it. And well, that gives me the chance to go back again a few days later. He's a bachelor, he's divorced and he doesn't have many people in his life. So Helen made up some goodies, brought it over to him, and just building a bit of a relationship, lots of chats. And by the end of it all, the van was fixed. He was happy and said, let's call him Mark. Mark, do you want to come over for supper sometime? Yeah, I'd love that. Well, this is led. You see what I'm saying here? He's an agnostic man, but he comes regularly to our house for supper. Many chats about the Lord with him, and he's very drawn to what he sees in our home. It's just an attempt. It's just a way of thinking, right? We're always on. We're always on. We're always looking. Who could I reach out to in the way the Lord has made me able? You know what? I could have gone door to door in Austin. I hate going door to door. I know some guys are great at it, and I feel guilty because I'm not. But honestly, if I'd gone to that man's house, in my case, I'm not saying like door to door is good. Don't anyone go from here saying Mike told us we shouldn't do this. I'm saying I'm not good at it. And anyways, I believe this way was far more fruitful. He's introverted as well. He loves to read. He loves history. We have lots we can talk about. And he has seen something. He's been attracted to the grace of God. He said that his unbelief is weakening and whatever. I pray that who I'm calling Mark will get saved. Well, who else can I talk about? Let's talk about, let's call him Jacob. So went to a corn roast held by Dave and Eunice Vanstone in Portage. Big corn roast. Lots of Christians invited. And turns out there's some Christians there who are also missional minded because they brought this boy who came from another country and they brought him along. And what am I calling him again? I'm calling him Jacob. And so Jacob comes along and he's single, but he's got a boy. And I'm going to the bonfire thinking, Lord, like who could I talk to, right? I'm not like some people who are really good at meeting those kinds of people, but is there something I can do for you here at this corn roast? And so anyways, I see this guy and we start chatting, and turns out I'm one of the right people to talk to him. And we just had a great conversation. It led to a friendship. I go into Brandon now and I meet him for coffee, and we've had lots of chats. He's agnostic. He doesn't believe there's a God, and he has these difficulties, and we chat through them. And some of my reading helps me. Some of my ability to listen and be kind and friendly and not need to beat people up and stuff. All that comes through a gentle approach. It's just the way God made me. I'm good at it. And there's other people working in his life too. We're having him over often. And anyways, there came a point where he was in a great crisis. He was so messed up. And who did he call when he couldn't stop crying? He called me. Like, thank you, Lord. I was the person he called. And so I dropped all my plans and I drove in. He's on the couch, doesn't know which way is up, he doesn't know which way is down, doesn't know if the couch is, doesn't know if anything is real. And I listen and I empathize. And then because of some of the battles that I've gone through, I'm able from my heart to speak truth to him. And he soaks it up. And he got through the crisis. Other people have been at work in his life. And we understand that he professed to be saved. I can't remember how many months ago. There's complications to it all. I don't exactly know where he's at right now, but he's making progress at the very least of faith in Christ. So, so evangelism, the way of life. Who else can I just briefly talk about here? Well, we've got a couple on the screen here, right? I'm trying to tell some of these stories that, highlight some of my strengths, but also highlight some of my weaknesses. And so here's one. We're coming home one night from Helen's folks, and it's late, and it's stormy, and it's miserable. And we see this car in the middle of a busy intersection, and there's danger everywhere about that scene. And I don't want to help these people. So I pull around and keep on going, but my wife's in the car behind, and she's a better person than me. And so she stops. I'm like, well, now I got some skin in the game, right? My wife's in this. So I have to stop. I'm telling stories of the grudging evangelist, the not very gifted evangelist, the not very bold evangelist who would rather go home and fire up the tea kettle and have a book and by a fire, But anyway, she gets in there, and so I get in there, and anyway, it was a crazy situation. But we got them off the road, and next thing we know, they're coming to our house for the night, and the car had 1,800 pounds of African food in it, which was just way too much for that little buggy. And anyways, long story short, we got tow trucks. We got 2 mechanics working on the car. They came to our house. I drove them to family in Brandon, picked them up in Brandon another day and drove them to family in Winnipeg, all back and forth and all this stuff. And it was great. And the Lord had generously provided us many funds so that we were able to make those mechanic bills go away from them. And I've always read Hebrews 12 or 13 or whatever it is about giving hospitality to strangers. And I'm like, well, where's the stranger I can give hospitality to? Any Christian I'm going to offer a meal to is going to do the same for us. But here it's like, yes, Lord, thank you. Even though I didn't want to, you made me. And now I am wanting to. You enabled us to actually obey that verse in Hebrews and to point these people to the Lord. And we're still friends with them. And they just texted me the other day. They're coming back to Winnipeg. They wanted to stay with us, but I said, I'm going to Toronto. I can't. But yeah. So evangelism is a way of life. It's everyday evangelism. It's when you're driving and you see someone in need and you mess up, but your wife comes through for you, and wonderful things happen from that. So just let's see here. Yeah, I'm done at the hour, I think. Someone tell me if I'm wrong. I'm counting on 15 more minutes here. So lots of divorced men in our lives. And my wife is wonderful with hospitality. And so we just invite a lot of people over for supper. And in our community, it works. I don't know what it's like in your neighborhoods. Maybe you could try it. Maybe it's more of a barbecue outside for you guys or something, but we try to have a lot of people in. We try to see people in need, have them over. A lot of single men who their common law partner is away, or they're divorced from their wife and they're lonely and they don't get, home cook. Some of them are excellent cooks, but not all of them are. And we just have a great time. And so we're getting to know people that way. I plan in a couple weeks there's a guy, and he's networked with a bunch of other, kind of secular people. And my plan is in 2 or 3 weeks to have him over for a movie night and just watch a good film together and then engage in conversation after. I'm going to be very upfront, like we're wanting to watch something so that we can talk about the big issues afterwards. So those are some things that we do as sort of an everyday evangelism kind of thing. Let's slide. Just one other thing here. So during COVID, during January, where I'm praying, like there's all these people around and they're going to hell. And I really don't want to knock on their doors. I just, like, sometimes I'd be like at evening and be like, yeah, tomorrow I'm going to do it. And then wake up in the morning, like, after lunch, I'm going to do it. And then after lunch comes and I'm going to study. And guilt. I have done it. And when other people like Becky and I have done it, and I just try to give her some moral support with the dogs. And then she does all the great talking and I nod my head and I can do that kind of, anyways, Lord, how could I help these people in a way that I can do it? And so Helen, I think, was the one that came up with this idea. We did a little mailer. I don't know if you can read it, but sometimes really super glossy professional looking things don't work in small communities because they're like, what's behind this? I don't trust this. But just a homespun kind of neighborly touch is the right touch sometimes in a small town. And so we got our artistic friend. We said, this is how we want it. We want it to be sort of a neighborly feel. And she designed this little thing for us, offering people a visit if they're lonely, a Bible if they're searching. Bought a bunch of beautiful Bibles. Love to tell you the phone ran off the hook. It didn't. But several weeks later, one divorced man texted us and said, I'd like to connect. And so we had more for supper, and this will lead to more meals and so on. But this is a way that I can work, a way that we can, the way the Lord has made us. And so that's some everyday evangelism. Slide. Let's talk about the third thing. I've talked about event-based evangelism. I've talked about everyday evangelism. And then the third thing that we do is evangelical evangelism. What do I mean by that? I mean, we like to evangelize Christians. This is the thing that fires me up. I find that I can get up in front of Christians, in front of the church, and I can open up the Bible, and I can seek to give an exposition of the scripture that is in front of us. And I can do it in a way that centers on Jesus Christ, while being real about my needs and weaknesses. And I find that when I do it, sometimes Jesus Christ himself speaks to his people. And I feel like Eric Liddell, when I preach to Christians, I feel God's pleasure. And Christians are helped. Believers are spoken to about Christ and about the gospel, and they're calmed because of his grace. They're given hope because of his mercy. They're given something to salve their guilty consciences. They know again, they're reminded again that they're welcomed and that they're accepted, that they're loved, that they're died for, that they're lived for, interceded for. And so the thing that really fires me up, the greatest thing I get to do in this planet is to stand up and preach the gospel to Christians. This is what I love to do. This is where I see the greatest fruit. As I'm real about struggles of my own, husband comes up to me and confesses his own battles with pornography. And by God's grace, we're just a little bit of it, but by God's grace, a year later, he's walking free. And the marriage is healthier. And we've had a number of cases like this, some less significant, some more. But I love to do evangelical evangelism, evangelizing Christians. And part of this is not just so in other words, I'm learning to believe. I used to apologize for this. It's like, oh, speaking to Christians. I mean, the real game is reaching out to unbelievers. But I'm starting to not do that to myself. I'm starting to believe in what I do. That teaching is important. That it's not just, we talked about this yesterday, right? The goal is not that people just get saved, but that they learn to offer their whole bodies in every area of their life as an act of worship to Christ, learning to conform every aspect of life to him. And so this is where I believe I can come in, especially, and speak to Christians and equip them and help them. I said that if we're to reach a secular culture, we need to be deeply embedded and distinctly different. And so I'm seeing my job more and more now as speaking to Christians so that when they go back to their work on Monday and when they go back to their gym in the evening or whatever, that they're going there with that grace resting in their hearts so that they can be distinctly different, that there's a quietness, there's an acceptance within them that others will be drawn to. And so this is, I believe, a very important part of our work, and I'm learning not to apologize that I'm not evangelizing so much. I'm evangelizing Christians. We're equipping others. So let me just talk a little bit about this. One of the things that we do is discipleship weekends, and we stole this from Brother Stephen and Brother Brian. And this has been a wonderful thing. Brother Ben here has come at least twice, I think, maybe 3, I'm not sure. But we've had these discipleship weekends where, just like them, we train young people, especially on how to study their Bibles. And it's been so wonderful. And this has led to a lot of other training where I've gone to Ohio and Halifax and Newfoundland, and I might be going to Vancouver shortly to just go to the local church and let's have a weekend on how to study the Bible. It's also led now to giving some talks and training on how to do expository preaching. I've done that recently. How to give expository preaching that is Christ-centered, but grace-based, and so on. And so Matthew Cain and I did that recently in Halifax. And I really, really enjoy this part of my work. Slide. Here's another picture of the discipleship weekend. We rent a campground and our camp and do this. Slide. Here, sorry, I'm kind of skipping ahead, but this is the expository workshop that we did in Halifax. Slide. Oh yeah, and then a year ago, last fall, I prepared some talks for homeschool parents on how to bring the gospel home to their kids. And I told Matthew Cain about it. I said, Matthew, we should do a weekend on this. And he says, Mike, we should do a podcast. Matthew likes to escalate things. And I really resisted, I don't want to do a podcast. And it'd be so much work, it'd be a constant burden. Anyways, he chipped away at it and we prayed about it. And we said, yeah, we're going to do a podcast. We called it the Practicology Podcast because we're all about integrating theology with real life, try to. And so we've been doing this for over a year now. And again, this is an episode, 20-minute-ish episode, comes out every Sunday night, 8 o'clock our time, I think. And it goes out. And again, it's a way of using our gifts, right? Some of the guys that used to make me feel guilty because of the work they were doing, well, they wouldn't be the right people to do this, but I can do this. And Matthew can do this. And what is it that we try to do? It's again, teaching that encourages, that focuses on Christ, that warms the heart, hopefully, that reminds and renews minds and hearts with the grace of God, so that as people are traveling to work, as they're traveling to whatever they do, as they're getting deeply embedded in a secular culture, they're going to do so with that distinctive difference. There's Christ in their hearts. There's his love, his grace is at work in their hearts. And so the Lord has helped us to carry on with this. It takes, I would say, about a day out of my week, every week, pretty much, to do this. And let me just tell you the cycle of how this works. So usually at the beginning of the week, I work away, if it's we take turns. So one week it'll be me, I'm responsible for the content and I'll take the lead. And then the next week it's him. But basically at the beginning of the week, I'll work away. Okay, I'll do some study. This is what we're going to talk about. And then we record. And as soon as we're done recording, generally this is what I feel. I need to find someone else to do this. I just, the study part is great, but I'm not a talking head, and I'm just not the right person for this. I need to find someone else to do it. We're never doing this again. And then because it's my turn, my content, I edit the file. He does his, I do mine. So I edit the file, and that of course means listening to the whole thing again, putting the music in and stuff. And I'm like, oh, wasn't that bad. And then Allison Flint, she's our social media gal, and she does the posting stuff. She schedules it, posts it. Sunday night it comes out. I'll listen to it Sunday night or Monday morning. I think, you know what? We'll do one more week. That wasn't bad. We'll do one more week. So So anyways, it has been a blessing, no, and we're pleased with what the Lord has done with it. Generally, right about the time, and I'm like, we got to pack this in. A note will come in from someone saying, your podcast really helped me with this. Really spoke to me about that. And we're like, yeah, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep doing this. So I think we're in it for the long term. At this point, I do need to apologize to Michael De Silva Jr. I enjoy the Langstaff podcast, and I promised him an episode over a year ago. And not only have I failed to deliver on that podcast, but the one I suggested to him, I stole it for Practicology. And he hasn't said a word about it. So I appreciate you, brother. Really do. And anyways, I'm going to finish here. But anyways, if you, so because of Allison, it's on, there's a Twitter feed for it. It's called M&M's Podcast. It's on Instagram and also on Facebook and Twitter. I think I already said that. And you could subscribe if you want. This is, I better stop. This is getting awkward now. But if there's a 20-minute window in your week where you would like to hear this, then you could subscribe to Practicology Podcast. Slide. Let's wrap up here, I think. Oh, I need to tell just a wee bit more about my wife's work. She told me I don't need to dwell on this, but she does a lot of mentoring of sisters younger and older. And she helps so much with the hospitality. She also is very busy helping with Postal Bible Studies, her parents' ministry. She also does editing for the Living Loved group. Rachel, we really appreciate your work and all you sisters that do that. It's been an encouragement to Helen, and she also gets to help edit some of those articles that go out. So thank you, sisters, for what you're doing. And my wife, I'm maybe a little bit the innovator. I mean, it's come up with the ideas sometimes, but she's really the implementer often. And she's just gifted, as we read in those verses, gifted with administration and implementation, and is a tremendous help to me. Well, I think you can see, well, let's get the 3 prayer requests up. I think that you can read these for yourself, and if you have spot and it's within your limits to pray a prayer or 2 for us, these are some things that you could mention. One thing that we're really looking for is focus in our work. Is it to really ramp up the equipping, the evangelizing, the evangelized already? Is it, in other words, is my work really to focus on teaching and building up Christians? Or do we continue to try and spread ourselves out the way we are right now? Do we move to Sandy Bay and help Becky Kew full time and try to see a work plan furthered there? Do we go to a big city somewhere and try to do a work there? I don't know. We would love to have you join us in prayer for that. Again, remember that hidden agenda of mine? How has the Lord made you? How has he gifted you? You've heard a lot of stuff. Maybe some of you are thinking, I could do a podcast. Well, that's great. But many of you are like, no, that's fine. You don't need to feel, right? But how's the Lord gifted you? The Lord, he wants you to come and present yourself to him as a living sacrifice. Not someone else's body, your body. How has he made you? How has he wired you and gifted you? You serve him within that, and know this, that provided you're a believer and you do take his call in your life seriously, then you share in the work of all the others too, including the work that Brian and Jeanette are doing.